Before we begin the show today, as a nation, we will observe a minute of silence on the passing of His Royal Highness, the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh.
Thank you, everyone, for observing that 1 minute silence. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to Meet Menaca, to celebrating you. So today we are going to be speaking about another important subject, nurturing better communication with children, with Dr. Dipti Joshi. She's a psychologist, specialist CBT psychotherapy, practicing as a psychologist for the last 20 years in Gujarat, India, and she specializes in a technique called CBT. Right now, she's affiliated to an institute in California called Feeling Good Institute, and in collaboration with them, conducting certificate online and offline training programs for psychotherapists on a therapy form called Team CBT. The question today is, do you want to know how to make your children listen to you and understand? As parents or grandparents, even having children in our family and friends, we know teaching parents and children how to engage in conversation is a valuable skill. Every parent hopes their children will talk to them, share their hopes and dreams, and seek comfort, reassurance, and advice. Children naturally want to be understood and communicate their thoughts and feelings with the people they love to nurture better relationships. So, and now, without further ado, let's hear from Dr. Dipti Joshi how we can attain that. Over to you, Dipti.
Thank you very much for having me here.
It's a pleasure to have you. The first question to you is, what do you mean by nurturing relationships?
Yeah, such a nice question. So I think I believe nurturing relationships are those relationships where in any relationship as such, when you feel safe, respected, understood. So when it comes to specifically with children, I think a relationship wherein both parents and children feel safe, feel mutually understood, respected. And I think it's a dynamic process where we continue to do certain things that can foster an environment of compassion, openness, transparency, mutual respect, and of course, growth.
Sure. I love that. It's, you know, who doesn't want to have it? And not only children, we all want to have those relationships.
True that,
so,
yeah.
Coming from that is, you know, you have said, what do you mean by nurturing relationships? So how do we nurture those relationships?
Yeah, I think that's such an important question because we all want to have a nurturing relationship, but the big question is about how to nurture, how to develop that. So I think when we are talking about, about communication through a parent's perspective, I'm going to talk today primarily about how parents can take complete responsibility of developing that kind of an environment wherein you could have a nurturing relationship. So I think the most important the most important thing that parents need to remember, and I think I personally believe that parenting is the most profound relationship responsibility that an adult can ever undertake over and above any other relationship. So it has to be given that kind of weightage. And when we give that kind of weightage, I think we have to take complete responsibility of continuously growing and developing in ways so that we can focus on ourselves and try to modify our own communication methods rather than expecting our children to make it easier for us. So yeah, strongly believe that when we are focused on ourselves, that's the place where most of the power lies.
Sure. As a parent, thank you so much. I think even before the start of this talk show, we were just having a chat and talking about having teenage children or grandchildren and how sometimes it is difficult to communicate. So if it is so important, can you tell us what are the components of those nurturing communications?
Yeah, I think I would love to tell you about that as per what I understand. So I think for any relationship, the most important thing is communication. It is through communication that you can connect with your children, and we all know that it is our responsibility to direct them towards what is right, what's wrong, guiding them towards that. So I strongly believe that unless and until you are able to establish a good connection, you will never be able to direct them in any direction. So in order to first establish that kind of a connection, we have to have certain communication skills. And when it comes to communication skill, I think it's very important for us to have a win-win stance. So when we have a win-win stance, we are able to lead the communication in such a way that we are able to have we are able to respect our children, and at the same time we can make sure that we are being respected. So I think that is a very, very important thing to keep in mind. And other than that, I think it is very important to always try to seek to understand first, and then make sure that you are skilled enough to make yourself also understood. I think this is a very, very famous concept given by Dr. Stephen Covey, and I'm sure everyone must have heard and read about it. So I think that is one of the most important component. But there's a little bit more that I would like to add, and that is most of the times we think that we do understand what our children feel, but sometimes we fail to express what we understand. And I think when we are not skilled enough to express what we have understood, then our children don't feel understood. So it is also very important to listen to them very, very carefully and then express back what you have understood. And then again, probably give them an opportunity to express further. So then I think they are able to feel understood. So there's a very good method that Dr. David Burns, he is my mentor. So he's given a very nice tool of effective communication. Will you like me to share with you about that?
Of course, would love to.
All right. So he has given a very nice concept, and he says that we must talk with our ear. So the acronym EAR, E stands for empathy. That is primarily to try to understand your children and then express what you have understood, as I just mentioned. And then A stands for assertiveness, wherein you become as clear as possible to be able to express your side. Because I think many a times we tend to complain that our children don't understand. However, I think we may have not expressed things as clear as our children want us to, and that could also be one of the reasons why they do not understand us. So it's very important for us to take that into consideration. And then R stands for respect. So I always say that R comes with a capital R. So we have to make sure that that we respect our children at whatever age they are, and make sure that they feel respected as well. So sure. that's the main component. And then he's given further for empathy, which is I think the most important component. He has given 3 more concepts for empathy. The first one is called Disarming Technique. So as the name suggests, so usually whenever we are in a conflicting situation, either we are defending our point of views, or we are attacking the other person, their point of views. So when we are armed with those kinds of, tools of self-defense or attacking, then automatically our children or whoever, I think these rules apply to all relationships. So right now I'm talking more in terms of children. So if we tend to become too self-righteous or too defensive about our viewpoints, then our children also get more attached to their viewpoints, and then we get into fights. So sometimes it's very important to try to agree with what they are saying. So even if it is totally unreasonable, it takes a special skill and understanding to agree with whatever they are saying, because for them that's a reality, and that's a disarming piece. So when you agree with them, they are then open to have a conversation. Until you don't agree, you will keep having those fights. So the moment you nod in agreement, they will also start nodding. But if you nod like that, they are going to nod double. So that's typically how it happens. So that's the disarming technique. The second one of the empathy is called thought empathy and feeling empathy. So basically, thought empathy is very, very carefully listening to them and then paraphrasing their words. So sometimes when they are making a point, but you don't agree to them, it's all right not to agree, but it's very important to make them feel heard. So when you paraphrase, you can always tell them that, okay, you're making these 5 points. Out of that, I do agree with this, and I hear you. They say this. So they will feel heard, and that's where that respect comes in. And then when they are saying something, you can also try to imagine what they could be feeling. So say, for example, I'm imagining right now, if a child says that you just don't listen to me. And then how do you respond to that? So I think the disarming piece over here would be agreeing to them that, yeah, you're right. I have definitely not listened to you for some time. And when you're saying that I'm not listening to you, that's the empathy part. I can imagine that probably you're feeling hurt and let down. That's the feeling empathy, wherein you try to imagine what they could be feeling. And then you can further inquire with gentle probing question, ask them that, could you tell me specifically what I did or say which made you feel that I did not listen to you? And then they get a chance to further open up. So here is a win-win component, because when you give that safe place for the child to express whatever they feel, then you get more information about what's going on in their mind, and they have a feeling of being understood. So that's where the empathy comes in place. And then in the I feel part, you can start expressing your feelings rather than your ideas at first. So you can start expressing that I also feel bad for making you feel that way. At the same time, I'm feeling sad about not being able to connect with you, and I'd like to do that in some ways. That's the I feel part. And then the respect part is something wherein you say something that the child feels good being in your company. So you could say some kind words, like, something like, I love you so much, I care for you, and that is why I would really want to do something so that you feel heard and understood, because I would also like to be felt heard and understood and respected. But I would like to first listen to you, what's going on in your mind, and then maybe I would like to tell you more about what's going on in my mind. So something of that kind. And so in short, you're actually demonstrating that you're listening. So you, in a way, put a lie to what the child has said, but you did not express it in that way. But when you're, so respectfully listening to them, they have an experience of you demonstrating that you are actually listening. So there's a hidden paradox over there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dipti. I love what you said, because I think as a leadership coach, I often said lead by example, and we often forget it at home. As parents, we have to do the same. So, thank you so much. And I read somewhere recently, they said, communicate with your whole body. And I loved it. because it is most of the time we are typing away, we are doing something else, and we are speaking to our children, right? So instead of that, the author goes on to say, you should always turn around, and if the child is younger, go to their height, stoop down or sit down and go to their height and look at them and understand their emotions. And sometimes when they're upset, they're saying things, and you can express exactly like you said, yes, I can see that you're upset, which means at least you're acknowledging, for whatever reason, you might not agree with it, but at least you're acknowledging the child is upset. And I love that. And I will definitely take away that communicate with the ear. I do say about active listening, but I have never phrased it that way. So I'm definitely going to borrow that. I love the phrase.
Yeah.
And I think any negotiation, or anyone who has ever been involved in any negotiation or conflict management, they will all know that it's a fundamental rule. 10% you have to agree with the other person for any conversation to go anywhere. Otherwise, even the conversation finishes even before you start. Isn't it? It's like a no man's land. So it's really, really important. So I love the fact that you reiterated the same thing, saying that agree with them, at least one point of view, and then they're more likely to listen to you to go forward. So I know that communication is important, as you said, in all relationships, with adults and with children. However, is there any fundamental difference between the children and adults?
Yeah. So I think most of the principles are same, but fundamentally what I think is what you just mentioned, that we have to be able to understand the developmental age of the child and then accordingly communicate with them. So I think it's tremendously important that parents get their facts right before talking to their children. So they don't expect too much from their children. So I think that sometimes is one of the major mistake which I come across, especially when it comes to communicating and discussing about difficult topics like, sex education or drugs and things like that. So in those moments, I think it's very important for parents to have their facts clear.
Sure. Okay. Thank you so much for that. So can I ask you, when do we start? What is the best age to start these communication skills, or to be aware of the communication between the parent and the child?
Wow, such a nice question. So, I believe that it starts from the day you conceive. And it's from the very first day. So, that's the moment when you have to start respecting the child and just try to observe and see what the child is coming up to, rather than molding it to become in a certain way the way you like. So I myself have two children, and they're very different from each other. I have two daughters, and I think right from early childhood, the biggest dream that I had was that I wanted to be a mom. So I have loved my journey of motherhood. So I think what I liked most was when I tried to see them and observe them, that what kind of a child do I have. And I think that helps us to be on the listening mode. So sometimes one child is like a sunflower, which needs like enough sunlight, and there's another child who's more like a rose flower, and with different strengths, with different needs. So I think that's very important, to listen to your children and understand them, and that's where the communication starts. And they definitely understand, they get it when you're trying to understand them. So, and it goes on till, I think, as long as you have children. So even when you are in your 90s and your children are, say, in their 60s or 70s, still your role as a parent continues. So it's a lifelong. Once a parent, always a parent.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. It was interesting that you said, I agree that you have to be aware of it from the time you are conceived. And a lot of science scientific evidence and research has been done, right? I know when I conceived, for sure, my dad, I remember saying to listen to a particular music or to do certain things so that they think that the infant or the fetus inside you will somehow feel that. And I was really amazed by you saying the similar thing. From that word go, you will have to become a parent, and you should be aware that whatever you say and do have an impact on your child. Is that a fair point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if we have that mindset, I believe that helps us to take responsibility of uh, focusing on ourselves, as in what we could do differently, rather than blaming our children for not being the ideal kids to us.
Sure. Thank you so much. So you mentioned there are some topics which parents find it difficult to communicate with children and address, particularly about substance abuse, sex education, or even grief or loss, particularly right now today with Prince Philip's funeral. It is another topic, isn't it? We often don't address it very well to the children. So would you be able to speak about how we can address and communicate to our children best, and how can we create that environment in the family so that children can open up and speak about these difficult subjects, for example, substance abuse, sex education, grief or loss?
Yeah, I think each of these topics are so wide and vast. So it's probably a little difficult for me to address each of them, but I'll just give you a little bit of an overview of
Sure.
what it could look like. So as I told you earlier also, as per the principle of ear, the same principle goes here. So say, for example, it's about sex education. So then it is in two directions. One is there are basically two solutions. One is an internal solution and one is an external solution, if I can put it up that way.
Sure.
So internal solutions is about parents having their own emotions, certain certain reservations, or some ways they are perceiving things. So once they become a parent, I think it's very important for themselves to deal with their own anxieties or their own hesitations. So that is, I think, a very important part. So they have to be okay with talking about some of the topics which I think in our times were a taboo. And probably I believe our parents and that culture was such, especially I'm talking about Asian parents. I'm not very well versed with how it is in the Western world, but I strongly believe that in Asian parents are really changing a lot today as compared to what they were earlier. So right now, I think parents over here are very eager to learn these new skills and techniques. At the same time, they want to get knowledge about how they could become better equipped with being able to talk to their children and also deal with their own emotions. So sometimes if they are anxious or they are hesitant, they have to first deal with their own emotions. So I think that's a very, very important piece. And then comes the external solutions. So external solutions is about actually just the 5 secrets which I talked to you about, as in to first listen to the child and then carefully see that what is it that you can slowly start addressing. So say, for example, if it comes to sex education. So I believe that sex education starts right from the time, say, a child is 2-3 year old. So that's the age when you could start teaching the child the concepts of good touch, bad touch. So that's where it begins. And when the child grows a little older, you could teach the children about using the correct names for body parts and not slangs. That's where it begins.
Sure.
And then when they grow further, I think children can be educated about using the, they are familiar with communication skills on topics like permission and consent. So due to the early onset of puberty, I think this is also the age when boys and girls have to be educated about the bodily functions as well. So over and above the topics like permission and consent, I think this is the age when you can start talking about, say, menstruation, about nocturnal emissions. Those are some of the topics, I think, pre-teens. Now we start even during pre-teens. And then as we move forward to more serious topics, like with teens, I think they need to be told about a lot of things right now. You could talk about, say, for example, aspects about intercourse, pregnancy, but also you can teach them about, and they have to be taught about birth control. Slowly moving on to topics like sexuality, gender identity, sexual orientation, gender dysphoria. So much is talked about LGBTQ community. So they get all this information from, wrong sources, I guess. And then they hear about all these atypical sexual interests, sometimes also about some kinds of sexual disorders, sexual dysfunctions. All this information is available on the net. And sometimes they get wrong information. And that is the reason I think it's very important for parents to get their facts clear so that they can talk about them more frequently and more easily with their children.
Sure.
So I guess parents have to be able to ready with the facts, and because I strongly believe that children look up to their parents for the right knowledge. If parents are ready to give the right knowledge without running around the bush, they are going to come to you, and you have to be able to address to those concerns.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dipti. It is really good that you addressed that. However, I think, of course, our age, like as you said, when we grew up, the situation, and now it is very different. I'm not sure how extensively it is educated in Asia as such, but in the Western countries for sure, including my daughter, their sex education starts very early in primary school. So I think they're quite very well versed, even more informed than us at times. So,
I think same lies with India. I think in India, schools are approaching, we are taking up so many projects. I think parents
Exactly.
are very open now. They really
Yes.
want to get educated. So we conduct programs in schools with sometimes role play techniques, wherein we have these techniques being played out. So the parents get the skill, just not the knowledge, also the skill.
Sure.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that. So, however, that is not the only issue, right? The difficult issue. So, for example, substance misuse. How do you communicate with children about that?
Yeah, I think that's also a very, very important topic. So that starts with bad influence. So, that's where you have to be able to communicate with your children and be well versed with what kind of friends they have and help them feel open to discuss with you. So, if you provide them that safe place to be able to protect their friends, at the same time talk about what they are a little doubtful about something, that's where it begins. So sometimes I think parents tend to get scared and they try to pull away the children from their friends, and that's where the mistake happens. So I think when parents feel a little more confident, then they are able to listen to their children first and then understand what's going on in their mind and then accordingly address it. So that's the first step, and then it follows through, I think, on the same principles how I told you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dipti, because sometimes it's very difficult conversations. And I was reading, I think it was last year, I was reading somewhere, and they said most of the behaviors what we have, we have to understand first, break it down, why they are hanging out with them. What is the motivation, or what is the reason behind hanging? And what are they gaining from that? Because what perhaps if they are not having that elsewhere, and then what are the habits they are having because of that relationship. And I think when you understand and break down that communication and break down that environment, why it's happening, and I think it is so much more easier to communicate with the child and change the environment or change that association little by little or step by step, rather than going in exactly like you said, isn't it? The first thing we say is, okay, don't hang out with that person. That is bad influence. And as a child, but most, even as adults, like, I mean, I often say when I am coaching, if I say to you, don't think of a pink elephant, all the while you're only thinking about the pink elephant. Children are no different, right? So
Yeah. And one important thing which I think it's important to know that habit and addiction are actually a solution to a problem.
yeah.
So children find solace in that, or whoever is getting addicted. There is some kind of a solace which is pulling them over there. So it's very important for us to step in that place and empathize with them deeply. People who are addicted or are drawn into substance abuse, it's not that they don't know that it's harmful. Even if they know that it's harmful, there is something within them which is making them think that that's the solution to their problem. So as parents, I think it's very important to empathize a little more deeply with them, to recognize the unconscious motives behind them going towards that place. And then I think you can lead them or direct them in a specific direction. But the first step is always understanding them.
Yeah, agree totally. Because I think that is where most of the parents, or even as adults, we go wrong when we communicate, isn't it? I often say, I'll take my personal example. I know it is good to go to the gym every single day. I know it is good to have 5 fruits and 5 vegetables. How often do we do or we don't do? So when we recognize that how difficult it is for us to change, I guess it brings that insight into us, how difficult it is for somebody else to change. Like you said, it is easier to empathize, easier to understand. Then obviously the communication will be in a much better light. Do you agree, Steve?
Yeah, totally. So I think it's very important to empathize a little more deeply. So when you said, I think even I must have had some kind of an addiction. I'm sure I think I was addicted to chocolates. And
oh, you are in good company. I call myself a chocoholic dentist.
Yeah, I remember you told me. So just all these, Indian sweets and chocolates. I just love sweets. So I remember that, when I used to have a very difficult client, sometimes I would tell myself that I think I need to feel good. So that I can attend better to my next client. And I noticed that was happening up to some extent. But then it was a huge price to pay, because then I started gaining weight and it started reflecting on my scale. So once I became aware that, I'm trying to find a solution through this way, I think after that, rather than beating up on myself, I try to find another way out. So that's where it helps. So, if we try to recognize that what is the reason why the child is doing what they're doing, and for that, or we have to actually get to the deeper layers, and for that we have to give them that safe place where they can talk without being judged. And that's where I think communication is very important. We are able to resolve their conflicts and have this open communication.
Sure.
So with difficult topics, I think it's even more important.
While we are in the difficult topic, can I quickly touch upon grief or loss as well? Because I can't find a better day to speak about it, particularly with royal family. We have witnessed it at many times, not only today. So how can we communicate better with our children when there is grief or loss involved?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And it's so painful when we see our children grieving. It's a painful experience for us as parents. So sometimes we just try to take a shortcut wherein we try to tell them, don't cry. And I think that's the mistake. So grief is a very, very important emotion wherein the person has to be able to grieve a loss. It is a natural human emotion. So rather than, running away from that, sometimes it's very important for allowing the person or the child to grieve and to just empathize. So when it's, say, uncomplicated grief, the only thing that you have to do is to just be with the child and cry along with the child if you can, rather than giving advices. Giving advices comes very easy to us as parents, but I think that's something which we need not do. So when they are able to grieve with their complete satisfaction, slowly they will themselves be ready to move on. So I think sometimes you have to try to ask them gentle probing questions about what is it that they are missing, what is it that they feel afraid of. Allow them to express whatever they are, and then through those gentle probing questions, probably we could lead them towards overcoming that grief.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dipti, because all these subjects are really important. So thank you so much for having a lot of patience and explaining it really well.
Thank you.
So, we primarily focused on children under a certain age about sex education, substance misuse, or grief. But as the children grow older, as you have already mentioned, once a parent, you're always a parent or a grandparent. There are different issues comes on play, right? The children might be having marital issues. There can be dominating or submissive relationships. There can be career problems. They could be in a very vulnerable position. On those times when the children have grown up beyond a certain age or even have left home, why is it important to nurture those relationships, and how can we do it?
Yeah, this is such an important question. However, I can see this just going on because this is related to geriatrics, and I think this is such an important topic. I have so many old age parents who are suffering and struggling because they're not able to connect very well with their children. So I think this is very important that we try to begin early on. So, once you grow old and then you think that now you want to develop that connection with your children, I think it doesn't happen. So it's very important that, when I believe it should start when children are wanting to talk to you. So so say for example, when the kids are young, you remember how they come and show, "Ma, see my painting," and we are busy with our work. So and that's the time when we have to remember that this is going to reverse one day when they are going to be busy. So I think that's where it probably has to begin. But if at all, for some reasons, if it hasn't happened that way, then I think at any age, if we are able to recognize that this is something which I have not done, which I was supposed to be doing, then you will have a mindset to be able to still do something to rectify it. And when we are talking about rectifying it, it again falls in these three components, that we have to try to understand where the child is, how busy the child is, or children are, say, even if they are in their 30s or 40s, I'm imagining, still I'm calling them children, keeping in mind, say, if I'm a parent of, say, 75-year-old. So I have to try to understand that, what kind of frame, of what kind of stage they are. So they are adults. So we have to be very careful at that age to definitely not give them advices, even if we know more than them. That, of course, is a reality. You've lived more life, so obviously you will know them. So I think sometimes it is very important to be respectful towards them and try to understand whether they need your advice or they don't need your advice. I think sometimes that's very important to remain mindful about. And then second important component, as I said, is assertiveness, wherein I think we have to be courageous enough to express what you feel. So if you're feeling lonely or let down, whatever your feelings are, it is very important to express it to your children, to sometimes just have the courage to be vulnerable in front of your children rather than being scared about it. It's sometimes scary, I can imagine, but I think that's where the key lies. If you have the courage to be vulnerable and share with them about this is how I feel, and then leave it, not force it to, just because you have expressed, you imagine that now they are going to take it differently. It may not happen. What's in your control is that you express, and then let it be. Let them come back to you if they want to. If they don't, then maybe try further by expressing and seeing what happens. And I think if it is done respectfully, usually this is a very important relationship. If it's done gently, correctly, I do believe every child wants to connect to their parent. I somehow strongly believe that.
Sure. I love that you said, it is not the era is my way or the highway, isn't it? You just tell them and then take a step back and let them be and allow them to have that space. And I have witnessed in my own experience and in other families, sometimes children seem to not to listen at all when you're saying something, but then after a few months or even sometimes after a year, they're doing exactly what you asked them to do. And obviously there's somewhere subconscious level they have been listening to you. So I think it's just patience, I guess, is the most difficult thing to have as a parent, but I think a must have as well at the meantime. So thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah. So I think if you are clear, then you will naturally have patience also. Say, for example, see, right now you know that you're wearing, say, a black and white kind of a t-shirt. If someone tells you, if a child tells you that you're wearing a pink t-shirt. Now, if you know for sure that this is black and white, you will have the patience to listen to the child. Ask the child, okay, tell me why it is pink. Why do you think it's pink? Do you think rose is pink or it is black and white? So, you have that attitude to be able to listen to them, and then through that gentle probing, probably you will lead them to the right answers. You don't have to be directly telling them. So those are some of the skills I think we need to develop as parents.
Sure. Thank you so much. It is like, in NLP, they would say, it is the tinted glasses we all wear, isn't it? We see different perspectives. We all see things very differently. So it's really, really important to understand that bit as well. Yeah. So when you said like over a particular period of time, sometimes as parents, we could have made a mistake and we might not have communicated with them well. I think personally, it is really important to be open and honest and be vulnerable and say, sorry, I should have been a better parent. Perhaps I didn't do my role very well. I could have done better, and open up and say that. What do you think, Dipti?
Yeah, I strongly believe that if we know that we have made some mistake, I think genuinity is the key. So if you genuinely feel that you have made some mistake, it's best to own it up. And it's sometimes hard, I can imagine, but even if you don't express it, you are anyway going to feel guilty. If you are not going to, if you know in your heart that you've not done some things correctly with your children, I think we do feel guilty. But it's always better when you express it out loud. You kind of get less detached to it, so it just gets vanished. So it's a win, but it's just that moment of anxiety where you feel scared. But anxiety, there's a protocol that whenever you are feeling anxious about something, the only way to get rid of it is through exposure. So just face it up. Face it up. If you're feeling anxious about anything, that's the only way you can completely get rid of. So yeah, it's very important to be honest to rather than denying your flaws. We are all human beings, or fallible human beings. We all make mistakes. So you can, I think sometimes it's also helpful to show your children that I am a human being. Even though I'm a parent, I can make mistakes, and it's all right to make mistakes. So when they make mistakes, they will also feel easy to come and share with you that, oh, I made a mistake. Sure. When you own up, so you can model those beautiful components of being a human being and not try to be a superstar.
And I was about to say exactly that, because by being vulnerable and being transparent and by saying to them, you have made mistakes and you're not perfect, you're encouraging them to say, open up and say when they fall, it's okay, because my parents fell as well. My mom is not perfect, or my dad is not perfect. So it's really important. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Because I think, and you were also talking about anxiety. Anxiety is always about the future, right? What is going to happen or not going to happen. So, and talk to any working parent, particularly, we all know the guilt trip. We have not spent enough time, or we have not spent quality time. So, I think we all have been there. I think the earlier we express it, and the more transparent we are, I think it becomes a bit easier. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
So going from there, can I ask you, what are some of the best ways to encourage children to open up with enthusiasm and confidence? So we have already touched upon some of them, actually, but just to round up, like what would you say? Because communicating is very different from communicating with confidence and enthusiasm. Am I right?
Yeah.
So what can we do for that?
So yeah, when you say communicating with enthusiasm, so I somehow believe that, you know, role modeling is the best way to teach our children. So let them have an experience of you uh, communicating with that confidence and zeal and with honesty. So say for example, if I am feeling angry with my child, I think it's very important for me to express that anger in a way that's not hurting, because anger can be very exhausting. I can feel angry all the time, and uh, and then it's like no point. So rather than feeling it in my mind, I would love to express it. So I'm trying to imagine, like, yeah, so recently I was a bit angry with my daughter because probably she didn't call back when I was messaging her and she's busy with something. So I remember when I told her that, hey beta, I noticed that I was really feeling a little angry when you didn't reply, and I hated to feel that towards you because I love you so much. Could you tell me what was it that held you from, you, like, you know, that was making you ignore my messages? Because I did see that you did come online but you did not reply me. So she just came around and she said, yeah, I'm glad you asked me that question, that what was holding you back, because there was something I would like to share with you about it. So, you know, it just fizzled out. I did express that I was angry. So it was not that I kept it in my mind, but it's just the way in which you express. I think that's the key.
Sure. Thank you so much. You know, welcome to the world of WhatsApp. Everybody knows when you have read the messages, right? Thank you so much. But you know, do you think there's also another factor in that? When we are expressing ourselves, it's important not to blame somebody else, but to say how we feel. You know, I feel that, or I thought like that, or I was angry, because it's not to blame somebody else. Do you think that's important, Dipti?
Yeah, very, very important. In fact, sometimes, you know, if you say that I feel attacked, that's in some way saying that you are attacking me. That's not an I feel statement. It's like, you know, saying that I feel hurt is a different thing than saying that I feel attacked. So it's very, very important that we don't blame the other person. So expressing your emotions in a gentle way is extremely important, and that's a skill. I think because it's a skill, you can get better with it and you can keep making mistakes. So even if I'm playing, say, piano for last 10 years, still I would flounder, still I would make mistakes, but then I can still improve. The more practice I do, the better I get with it. The same rule lies with communication. The more you mindfully practice the right notes and you create music out of it, you get better with it. And that's the key, reflecting on yourself and examining what I could have done differently. And that's where your own growth lies as a parent.
Thank you so much, Dipti. As a parent first, and then also as a host, and for all the audience, that shows I have already got enough questions for you from the audience. It shows how enthusiastic people are to ask the questions, and you know, I'm sure you will give the best answers possible as well. So thank you so much. So before we finish, can you give 3 to 5 takeaways what people can remember from today's show to nurture the relationship with their children by communicating? Thank you.
All right. Yeah, 3 most important steps, things. So I think the first thing which I would like to tell you is stop blaming and take complete, like 100% responsibility of nurturing your relationship with your children, because that's the only thing which is in your control, and that's the only thing where you can do something. Maybe you could influence your children through your own behaviors, but I don't think we can directly impact them. So that's the first one. Second, I think, is learning the communication skill, about how to communicate and what to communicate, at what age to communicate. Get those facts clear based on what your which age your child is and what those communication skill components are, And the third one is practice. Practice communicating and self-examining, that how well are you doing. Give yourself a letter grade, say for example, whether you did a good, like A class communication, or whether you were failing. So I think that those are the three keys as per my understanding.
Thank you so much, Dipti. It has been a pleasure listening to you. So obviously we will have the question time a bit later. As a parent, I have learned a lot today, and I will definitely be implementing some of them. And one thing I will definitely take home is communicate with the ears. So that is, listen more. That is one message I will definitely be taking home. So thank you so much for being the guest. It's been really, really great having you.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel so honored to be with this elite crowd. I was just looking at everyone. My God, there are so many nice people. I would love to remain associated with this group. This is so beautiful. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to have you, and you are in our WhatsApp community as well. So, and I will send you the Facebook link as well. So you're more than welcome to join us everywhere. Thank you, Dipti. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you
so
much.
As per tradition, let me announce the next week's topic and speaker. It will be well-being at work with Dr. Sivayoganathan, a specialist in occupational medicine, and worked as the director of Occupational Health Department for 10 years before retirement. He also worked at Ford Motor Company and other industries. And now, as he said to me when I spoke to him, he's enjoying the retirement and spending time with grandson. There you go, Dipti. So he's doing the right thing. Hopefully, next week, we will be able to learn more about how we can promote well-being at work. Now, Swati Panwa will be giving the vote of thanks. Over to you, Swati.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Dipti, for gracing our show and enlightening us with such an important topic. Every parent has some or the other takeaway today. I would also like to thank all the participants and eager parents, for the precious time and making Meet Menaca a great success and being connected with us for so long. Dr. Dipti, this has been so close to every parent because every parent wants to be successful. But somehow with this millennium generation, where we are going wrong, I really don't know. As you said, the key takeaway were like practice, communicating, and self-examining. I think that's a vicious cycle, but we somehow get dragged away during the process of implementing. And yeah, as an Asian parent, I always say there's a difference in approach when we communicate with our kids and we communicate with others. So as you rightly said, listening. Yeah, we'll implement that for a change.
It's hard.
As you say, all good things come to an end. So is today's event. And thanks once again, all the participants and the Meet Menaca committee.
Thank you, Swati. Thank you so much for your kind words. Okay, so, absolutely, Swati, we become accountability buddies from now on, right? How to communicate with our teenage children after today's show. Thank you so much. So obviously, people have been very keen to ask questions. The first question to you, Dipti, is, children sometimes don't listen how much ever we try to communicate. What can we do as parents in this scenario?
Yeah, that's a nice question. I think we spoke so much about it. So, yeah, I would once again repeat that, when our children are not listening to us, I think that's a clue that probably we are not listening to them. So we have to try to do a bit of self-examination about what is it that I missed out on. So when they're not feeling heard, then they become defensive and attached to their viewpoints. And that's the point when they'll just shut up. And, that's where they get defensive.
Sure. Thank you so much. The next question to you is, many children find it difficult to speak to their parents, particularly when they have done something wrong. What can we do to change it?
Yeah, I think this is a very important question. So here is where we have to be able to give them that safe place and not try to make them ideal or consider them to be very ideal kids. So if you allow them to have that safe place, they get it, like, So I think that's the key. So when they have made a mistake and you make a big deal out of it, I think that's where they feel very defensive, because they're already very scared. So when they're scared, their autonomous system that gets into a fight, flight, freeze mode. So either they will want to fight because they are scared, or they would run away, or they would just get numb. But if, as parents, we are able to give them that safe environment, then they will slowly own it up.
Sure. The next question to you is, often as parents, we want the children to do well. In that aspect, they sometimes feel we are pushy rather than trying to motivate them to do better. So how can we change that scenario?
Yeah, I think it's very natural for every parent to want to, have their kids, make their kids perform better or do their best. So I think there's nothing wrong in it. It goes wrong when, we try to uh, we try to force it upon on our children rather than considering them as separate entities. So if we are able to remember that, then we can try to understand first that why they are not wanting to do what we want them to do. Once we understand that, after that you can also express your viewpoints, that what are the reasons, that why do you want them to say complete their homeworks and things like that. But if you are able to connect with their feelings, I think it becomes easier. So depending on the child's age, I think, let me give you an example for this probably. So I remember when my daughter was, I think, in her 4th or 5th grade, and once she really wanted to go for a birthday party, and at the same time she had to complete her homework assignment next day for school, and she was just complaining about it, and she really didn't want to do it. So what I did was I sat with her. I said that, yeah, it's so yucky, isn't it? We shouldn't be wanting to do this homework. Why did teacher give this homework? Even I'm feeling very angry the way she was feeling angry. I went on feeling angry with her. And then I said that it's all right if you don't do the homework. The only problem will be that probably tomorrow your teacher will be a little unhappy with you. So do you think that's okay for you? And then she took the ownership of it and she said, no, that's not okay. So then she came up with that answer herself, that, okay, I'll go to the party, but maybe a little later. I didn't have to say that to her, because I did not try to take away that pain from her. I just let that pain be, that frustration be. And I think sometimes that helps.
So thank you so much, because it's about making them understand their own responsibility than we taking responsibility for their actions, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think there is something to be also said about living our dreams through our children. I think we have to be very, very careful not to do that. What is your take on it?
Yeah, I strongly believe that we don't own our children in that sense, to mold them to become something that we couldn't become. I think that's a very, very important responsibility of every parent, to let the child be, consider them as gifts from God, and gracefully nurture them the way they are born to be nurtured, not mold them into becoming something they don't want to become, or they're not meant to be.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dipti. Please hang on, whoever is on the Zoom, because we will go into our private chat or after session party or whatever you call it. For people on Facebook, it's that time of the day to say goodbye to you until next week, till we come with another topic, well-being at work with Dr. Sivaya Yoganathan. Till that, stay safe, be happy, and keep smiling.